All right, so the law of cosine, section 12.4, is different than the normal cosine. We know that normal cosine can only be used for right triangles, but the law of cosine can be used for non-right triangles. So let's take a look at what the actual formula for the law of cosine is. C squared equals a squared plus b squared minus 2ab times the cosine of angle C. So a couple important things about the law of cosine. The first very important piece, that is the only angle in the law of cosine. We know capital letters are angles, lowercase letters are sides, right? This side out in front must correspond to this angle at the end of the law of cosine. What that means then is that if we were happen to be asked to solve for side A, then we would want to put a squared out in front, which means cosine of angle A would have to go at the end. And then the other two side lengths would go in the other four spots. So this would be b squared plus c squared minus 2bc times the cosine of angle A. So if we happen to be asked to solve for angle B with the law of cosine, and there's only one place for an angle in the law of cosine, and it's at the end, then we would have to put angle B right there. And if angle B is at the end, then side B has to go at the beginning, which means a squared plus c squared minus 2ac times the cosine of angle B. Now, just like when we talked about the Pythagorean theorem, and I said, well, we're used to hearing the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, but it could be x, y, and z. It could be any variables, right? Same thing with the law of cosine. Don't get caught up on a's, b's, and c's. Understand what is in these spots. We have a side that must correspond to that angle, and then we have the other two side measures in those four spots. All right, so here's our first example. Obviously a non-right triangle where we are being asked to find side W, right? Side W, that's a lowercase w, so it means side W. And there it is right there. And notice this is triangle WHY, so it doesn't have A, B, and C in it, right? So that's kind of good practice. All right, since we're finding side W, we're going to start the law of cosines with W squared, which means eventually the cosine of angle W will be on the end. But first we need the other two side lengths, 36 squared plus 41 squared minus 36, oh, I forgot the 2, minus 2 times 36 times 41 times the cosine of angle W, which is 49 degrees. So to solve for W here, we have to take the square root of both sides. There we go. Square root of W squared obviously is W, and now we can plug the rest of that into the calculator and find out our answer. Second square root, 36 squared plus 41 squared minus 2 times 36 times 41 cosine 49. Don't forget to make sure you're in degree mode always. Equals. They wanted me to round to the nearest centimeter, so this will round to 32 centimeters. So in our next example, we are being asked to find the measure of angle A. So obviously angle A is right down here. We know side A, so that'll have to go out in front. And we know the other two sides right there. So we have everything we need to use the law of cosine. So let's set it up. Side A, 42 squared, equals the other two sides, 36 squared plus 34 squared minus 2 times 36 times 34 times the cosine of angle A, which is what we're being asked to find. Now, as you can probably anticipate, the solving for the angle is more complicated than solving for the side, right? Now, let me point out a very common mistake that people make. They want to square this, which is perfectly fine to do, then square this, then square this. This is all perfectly fine to do. Then multiply this together. All of that is perfectly okay to do, but here comes the mistake. Then you know what they want to do next? They want to combine all of this together. You cannot do that because this is all being multiplied together. So you cannot separate that 2 times 36 times 34 from the cosine of A. Okay? So watch out for that mistake. It's a very common mistake. Now, what I'm going to do in my solving is I'm not going to square or multiply anything. I'm going to use the calculator one time at the end. So just pay attention to the solving that's going to happen here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take 36 squared and I'm going to subtract it over to the other side. So I'm going to have 42 squared minus 36 squared. I'm also going to take the 34 squared and subtract it over to the left side. So I'll have minus 34 squared. Now all of this is going to equal negative 2 times 36 times 34 times the cosine of angle A. All right, now I need to get the cosine of angle A by itself. We know that it's being multiplied by the negative 2 times 36 times 34. I undo multiplication by dividing. So I'm going to divide both sides of this equation by negative 2 times 36 times 34 on both sides. So on the right side, the negative 2 times 36 times 34 cancels out on the top and the bottom. Leaves me with the cosine of angle A by itself. That's a good thing. And it's going to equal everything that we see here on the left. 42 squared minus 36 squared minus 34 squared all over negative 2 times 36 times 34. Now we're ready to use the inverse cosine. We know, we've talked, the inverse cosine undoes the cosine, so that'll get me angle A all by itself. But if I take the inverse cosine of that side, then I have to take the inverse cosine of this whole side over here. And that's what I'm going to plug into my calculator. Second cosine, I'm going to use the fraction function, alpha y equals, I'm going to choose n divided by d, which is my fraction. That makes things a little bit easier with parentheses. 42 squared minus 36 squared minus 34 squared. Bump down to my denominator, negative 2 times 36 times 34. Bump it out. Close my parentheses for the inverse cosine. Enter. They asked me to round to the nearest degree, so I got 74 degrees.